Hi there, this is Renee Hobbs, and I'm doing a screencast research review of an article by Julie Coio and Elizabeth Dobler from 2007 entitled Exploring the Online Reading Comprehension Strategies Used by Sixth Grade Skilled Readers. It appeared in Reading Research Quarterly, which is the leading scholarly journal of the International Reading Association. What I'm going to do is summarize the article and analyze it, um, and illustrate a little bit about how I read a scholarly article and how it helps me develop my own ideas and explore topics of special interest to me. So the first thing I do is I scan the article. Of course, I've got these abstracts. I often will start by reading the abstract. Um, and in this case, the abstract gives me an understanding that what I'm looking at is a close analysis of 11 sixth graders who were asked to do two tasks that involved online reading. One where they had to read within a website, and the other where they had to do a search process to find information. And what I can see from the abstract is that this study is going to look at the role of prior knowledge and the role of inferential reasoning and the role of self-regulation in reading processes, and think a little bit about how readers construct texts while they read online, which is a really interesting and cool idea. And so I want to try to understand that better. So the article starts by providing a theoretical framework, and I just see that is kind of interesting. And then there's a little bit about the methods of research and how they selected these 11 kids and where these kids come from and who were they. A little bit about the tasks that were asked, the kids were asked to do, which look very teacher friendly and sort of like the kind of academic tasks that happen all the time in class. This section called data analysis, which explains how they handled the data. It looks like they went through 4 phases of uh, analysis and trying to make sense of what they found, and then the findings. And of course, I immediately recognize at table 4 that all of the main findings are in this one beautiful table. So before I read any more, I read this really closely because I do want to understand the thesis of the article, which is that there are some similarities between online reading and the reading of print text, but there are some uniquenesses as well. And this table introduces me to some of the evidence that they're going to be providing in the article. So I see that the next section of the article is the evidence, and it goes on, and I can see that there's a lot of evidence that's based on kids talking. So I know that their research has something to do with kids talking. And I get to the discussion section, and I often look at the discussion section before I dig into the article, just so I can get a sense of what to expect. So in this discussion section, I understand that the authors are talking about how kids who are good readers are reading in a really strategic way, and that some of the strategies of using their prior knowledge and making inferences and predictions, especially predictions, are very much parallel to what kids do when they're reading print texts. And then I do see that she describes some implications, and there's her nice list of references. So now let's go back, now that we've kind of gotten the kind of overview, let's go back and kind of walk through a summary of the big ideas. So in the beginning of the article, she does a pretty good job of saying that reading, what is reading, right? And I really, of course, am really loving her definition of reading. Reading is the sharing of meaning, right? You might think of it as reading, but it's actually about the active construction of meaning using a set of strategies. And she frames out her theoretical framework. She's definitely a reading researcher, and I can tell that because she she uses some of the authors and the names of the authors. She references the Rand, the Rand, the RRSG, the Rand Reading Study Group from 2002. This was a really important study that where the reading researchers kind of synthesized everything we think we know, we've learned in the last 70 years of reading research. So I know she's mainstream. That's her community. The people she's speaking to are these reading researchers. She also is participating in, and her advisor is a guy in the reading community who's conceptualized this idea of new literacies. And she also draws from an area of scholarship that I wasn't really that familiar with called cognitive flexibility. So you can see I made a note here. Is this a theory of cognitive flexibility? Where does that come from? Is it from education or psychology or social psychology? And so I probably will want to go back and look at this guy Spiro and try to figure out where's he coming from. It looks like this is where Coio is getting the concept of synthesis, the idea of interpretation and meaning making across multiple texts. So I want to learn more about that discourse community, that group of scholars who's interested in that, because I'm not familiar with that group of scholars. So after she introduces us to the theoretical framework, then she digs in and does the lit review, right? And gives us a really good overview of like what we know about reading. And I feel like librarians should really understand what we know about reading, because librarians are so vital to supporting the process of people being good lifelong readers. So I've highlighted passages that I thought were interesting. What do good readers do? They preview the text, they set goals, they make predictions, they monitor their understanding, they ask questions, and they interpret, right? And of course, how do people learn to do that? Well, they see other people model that practice. They get lots of opportunities, they should get lots of opportunities to see teachers and other people in their lives, family members, peers, and friends, model that active reading process. That's how you learn to read, by seeing and participating in reading communities where people engage in those practices. So then the question is, how different is online reading or not? This is where she introduces the 3 variables of interest: prior knowledge, inferential reasoning, self-regulation. And in this next section, she also explains, that reading is different online because of the phenomenon of hypertext. So for instance, readers are regularly required to infer relationships among links. Like, why is this link here? How is it adding to my understanding? You have to make that active reasoning process both before you click on the link and after you click on the link and get to the place you're at and go, why is this here? And how does it add to my understanding? I thought that was a pretty cool section. She also does something here where she distinguishes between hypertext, when one link links to another within a document, within a single author's work, and internet text, where one hyperlink takes you to another author with another point of view and another argument. I thought that was interesting, and I feel like I've certainly encountered students who don't seem to clearly understand the idea that some links take you to new authors and with new points of view. And I'm really interested in how people gain an understanding of that, and where does that understanding come from, and what happens if you don't understand that very well. All right, so then she gets into the methods, and she describes she says something here I thought is really interesting. She says, oh, by the way, this is like an academic, we're doing this because we're interested in kids reading in school. And these days, lots of people are studying kids reading and media use outside of school, but we're not paying attention to that. We're interested in school reading. And when I saw this, I thought to myself, oh, this is because Reading Research Quarterly, one of her reviewers made her put this in, right? Don't forget about informal learning outside of school, in libraries. And she's like, yeah, but we're not dealing with that. This is a study about the kind of academic reading you do in school. Fine, okay. So then she describes how she selected the kids and how they picked the readers and all the parental permissions and why they picked kids who had good achievement scores, and I thought that was fascinating. It looked like a lot of work. Now, this is where I really loved it. Here at the bottom of page 223, so comforting. You can see I wrote, comforting to discover that other researchers have tech problems. So they tried to video record the sessions, and they couldn't because the technology didn't work. And the school wouldn't let them use keystroke data, which would have required a special software to be installed on the computer. So they actually kind of did this study, surprisingly, low tech. Then she describes the task, the Five Tiger project, where kids basically are taken to this website and asked to answer these questions. Then she describes the method that the kids were used, this Think Aloud protocol. And of course, Think Aloud protocol is fascinating. I think as I was reading this, I started thinking about like why librarians actually might be doing something like Think Aloud protocol all the time when they're modeling at the reference desk, right? How do we search and find when they're using the talk through the strategy, that they're using a version of Think Aloud protocols in the process of engaging with patrons. So that's been kind of interesting. Then she describes the second task where kids go to this website and then they search on one of two search tasks that the researchers have designed. Then I just love this section where she describes how they handled this data, because they have these transcripts, right? These transcripts of detailed kid talk about their process, their reading process. So she describes in a very transparent way the process. And of course, this is a signature characteristic of great research. And as you're learning to read and evaluate good research, you want to look at how transparently the methods section is described. Because the idea here is this is described so transparently that if you wanted to replicate this study and do it on your own, you could literally read this article and follow the steps, the procedures step by step, and reproduce this exact study, because she describes absolutely everything about how they analyze the data, right? And just to overview, first, they looked for propositional clusters, which is basically clusters of activity around an area of content. Then in the second phase, they started looking for patterns. They read one case study of a kid, and then when they read the second one, they compared and contrasted kid 1 to kid 2, right? And then they start to develop some codes, some names and terms, right? And then in phase 3, where they look at this issue of prior knowledge, where they look at how is prior knowledge getting used, and they read the transcripts and think about where is prior knowledge coming in. And then in the fourth phase, they use this model that they stole from another researcher, planning, predicting, monitoring, and evaluating. And they read through the transcript with that concept in mind. And then they have the difficult challenge of figuring out how to share what insights they had. And this is why they got in Reading Research Quarterly, because this chart is so smart, right? Here are the 3 reading comprehension strategies: activating prior knowledge, using inferential reasoning, and self-regulation. That's the process of discovering when, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you read through a passage and you find yourself like not comprehending, or you're distracted, you're thinking about your dinner or life or your boyfriend or whatever, and then you realize, oh my God, my eyes have been passing through this stuff, but I haven't really been paying attention. So you stop, you go back, and you reread, right? That's self-regulating reading processes. Good readers do that all the time. Bad readers don't do that. So she then goes through each of these items with examples from the transcripts. And let me just see if I can go back to my notes to identify stuff I thought was really cool. Yeah, so she describes how this is really a cycle. This reading process is really a cycle of interpretation. And for me, the most relevant and meaningful aspects of this research are this idea that internet reading, online reading, seems to actively involve layers of inference making, right? Because the orientation process of moving from one hyperlinked text to another does provide opportunities for people to get lost, and you have to be constantly keep thinking, are you getting closer to solving your problem or further away from solving your problem? You have to constantly be keeping your task in mind. And that's why this figure 3 is so useful, right? The good readers are really strategic and they're goal oriented. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I thought that her use of the cases from readers like Andrew and Marina was actually pretty helpful, because it allowed us to see that, first of all, that this happens really fast. That's what table 5 shows. In just a few sentences, we see like 5 different strategies used. And then in her other table, this one, figure 4, where she shows how these aren't like a sequence where first you plan and then you predict and then you monitor and then you evaluate. Actually, you're doing all of those strategies like simultaneously. And I think that's quite insightful, actually, and that made me think a lot about how complex and layered the process of reading and analyzing text really is. So when she got to the discussion section, there were really just 2 ideas that I think are going to be useful to my own research and that I want to think more deeply about. And the one big one is right here, right? So that this idea, she says, by the way, reading is sort of like composing, that as you're composing, right, you are a kind of author. And that especially in online reading, you're really an author, because your choice of where to read and when to click and how to scroll and how to navigate through the text is actually a kind of curatorial or authorship kind of process. And that's going to be really individualistic, right? We're all going to read a piece of online stuff, but we're going to move through it differently. We're going to click on different things. We're going to make sense of it in different ways. And so I really like this idea of online reading as a kind of self-directed text construction where readers choose their own unique paths, right? And that's cool because it makes me think about how reading comprehension and search are linked. And so I wonder, how do reading specialists and librarians work together to build reading comprehension skills when reading comprehension and search are linked? That seems to be, from my point of view, the main idea. I did want to point out one thing that was quite intriguing and very relevant to my own work. She says, oh, by the way, it was troublesome to discover that no students in our study appeared concerned about identifying the author or purpose when they solved these tasks. And since in the world of media literacy, we spend a lot of time asking kids to think about who's the author, what's the purpose, what's the point of view, those essential critical thinking skills. It's fascinating to discover that the 11 skilled readers in this study made no effort to do that when the task did not prompt them to do it. Okay, so I guess all I can do is say that now I've tried to summarize and analyze an article from Julie Coio and Elizabeth Dobler that looks at the online reading comprehension strategies used by 6th grade readers. I've definitely gotten a deeper understanding of how prior knowledge and inferential reasoning and self-regulation work in the online reading process. And for me, the big issues that are going to inform my own research are thinking about reading as a process of writing, in that online readers construct their choices during the reading process, and in wondering about the consequences for reading specialists and librarians when we learn that reading comprehension and search are so closely linked together.